Matthew 8. Then Jesus got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us. We're going to drown." And he replied, "You have little faith. Why are you so afraid?" Mark 4:40, the version there says, "Do you still have no faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Matthew 14, another story. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. So they went off. He was taking care of the crowd. After he dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. And the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the winds because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake, as you do. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. Immediately. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they had climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Note that the winds and the storms in these stories were bad. In fact, so bad that these professional sailors, some of them grew up on that lake. Their dads probably fished in that lake as well. This is their life. Listen, if your professional sailors used to the lake are terrified, you should be scared. True? If they're worried about drowning, then I'm in trouble because I have no idea about boats. The storm was no small issue. But what is Jesus doing in the middle of the storms and the fierce winds? He's either sleeping as waves crash over the boat, it's swamping the boat, or he's walking on the water as the water crashes against the boat. When Jesus was walking on the windy sea, when did the winds calm down? You're probably right if you're thinking it. When they climbed into the boat, him and Peter, the wind died down. Only after he got in the boat. You may not like this, but Jesus didn't calm the storm as Peter walked on the water. He didn't just calm the storm so Peter could walk in the water. Peter had to walk on the water in the middle of those fierce winds. That's why he began to doubt, and because of fear, because of the wind. But Jesus wasn't worried about the great winds affecting the disciples. Jesus didn't even address the great winds as he walked on the water or slept on the boat. Friends, when you're living in stormy times, how are you living in stormy times? Afraid? Fighting the storm? Hiding from the storm? Well, Jesus slept in the storm and walked through the winds. The environment around Jesus did not limit him, it did not distract him, and it did not manipulate a response from him. He just carried on sleeping, carried on walking. What about you? And when the disciples woke Jesus up because of their great distress, what did Jesus say to them? You have little faith. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Then he got up and he rebuked the winds and the waves. It was completely calm. So there's two important lessons I believe Jesus was teaching his disciples in these situations. First, don't let circumstances distract your mission or disturb your peace. Walk by faith, not by fear. You've heard it before, and you're seeing it in Jesus. Secondly, Jesus was setting a standard he wanted the disciples to aspire to. Jesus will sometimes sleep through your storm so you get a chance to deal with the storm. And you can't change the storm through fear or just complaint or just by hard work. We change it by faith. Act in faith, not in fear. In fact, we love seeing all the miracles that Jesus did, but did you know nearly all those miracles were responses to people's faith? They came to him in faith. Faith activated the result. Why are you so afraid, he said? Do you still have no faith? It was the missing ingredient. Jesus wasn't ridiculing the disciples, he was coaching them. And in the times we live in at the moment, I think we're only facing small winds, not big storms. What would Jesus say to us? What would Jesus say to you? Well done on using your faith. Well done in trusting me and staying on course, on mission with what I've given you to do. Or would he say, you've little faith, why are you so afraid? Bigger storms will come. And there's a new walk of faith Jesus is currently coaching us in. Remember the peace Jesus had as he slept in the middle of the storm. That's what you're called to. Remember the confidence Jesus had as he walked through the waves. That's what you're called to. In the midst of risk and turmoil, activate faith and you'll know peace and confidence. It comes by faith, not because someone changed the storm. In the letter I sent out to you on Friday, the email, I outlined how Legacy is going to walk through the COVID-19 pandemic under the conditions of the COVID-19 protection framework, the traffic light system. We're having two services, one vaccination required, the other one is regardless of vaccination status for anybody. Most of our programs will have options for both vaccinated and open gatherings. Not all of them, but most will. It's not ideal. It's not forever, but we can make it work while we assess the real impact of COVID-19 when it eventually gets into Christchurch. Only remember Jesus' response in the storms and winds, resting and walking while on mission. Resting and walking on his mission. He wasn't distracted by the storm or busy with the storm. He was simply continuing on the mission his Father had given him on earth. So church, how are we going to deal with this pandemic and the limitations imposed by the new traffic light system? Well, here's our plan of action. We're going to be a community of worshipping disciples, overflowing with the love and presence of God, serving and transforming lives, communities, and generations with the gospel of Jesus Christ. How are we going to deal with the threat of sickness and death from COVID? Well, we're going to become a community of worshipping disciples, overflowing with the love and presence of God. How are we going to deal with issues related to segregation and limitation of freedoms? Well, we're going to be a community of worshipping disciples, overflowing with the love and presence of God, serving, transforming lives, communities, generations with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Amen? That's the mission we're here for. Storms will come, storms will go. The earth will shake. We're on mission. In Matthew 8, Jesus had crowds following him, whom he would preach the gospel to. He would heal their sick. He responds in Matthew 8 to the request of a Roman centurion by healing his servant. He goes to Peter's house. Peter's mother-in-law is sick, so he heals her. She had a fever. What does a fever come from? Typically viruses. And then in the evening, because of what he had done, the whole town sends out a crowd of people Here it is. You think, man, he's just getting ready. He's going to pop off Netflix and watch a few shows, then he's going to have a snooze. No. All a crowd of sick and demon-possessed people turn up, and Jesus heals them all, sets them free. That's Matthew 8. You know what happens next? Then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. That's the context. Jesus was asleep because he was tired from ministering the gospel to crowds of people, non-stop. And what happens when they get to the other side of the lake? After Jesus calmed the storm, do you know what happens next? When he arrived on the other side, in the region of the Gadarenes, the two demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. That's nice. Welcome party. Welcome. We are legion. Welcome. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. This is what happened when he arrived on the shore. So there's no break time for Jesus when he reaches the shore. He's now facing a legion of demons, so he casts them out. Do you know what happens next? It's kind of funny. He steps back in the boat, crosses over, comes to his own town. Some men brought to him a paralyzed man lying on a mat. More work to do. He goes to his next location, only to have people turn up with a paralyzed man. That is the context of Jesus sleeping in the boat in the disciples' storm. Jesus wasn't distracted by the storm. Jesus wasn't focusing on the storm. He wasn't afraid of the storm. He simply didn't have time for the storm because he was so focused on the mission. Oh, good. Got a few minutes in the boat before we get to the next mission space. Storm. The traffic light system comes in on Friday. North Islanders are coming. Anyone got relatives in Auckland? Oh, quite a few. Anyone got friends in Auckland? Do we love Aucklanders? Yes. Welcome, friends and family. Oh man, traffic lights, North Islanders. There's even a new variant of COVID-19 outbreaking in South Africa. What's our focus? To be a community of worshipping disciples. Regardless of what changes we have to make to our structure or doing things, we're focused on our mission, not on our structure. Structures change. And I believe there are huge opportunities for churches focused on mission in these stormy times. I'm believing that God is going to make changes in his church so we can receive the harvest he wants to bring in. Not just our church, but his church, the church. He's going to change things. What's your part in the mission in these weeks and months ahead? Are you clear, focused, undistracted, busy on the mission he's got you here for? Now, I want to talk about tigers. Our focus on the mission doesn't mean that we're unaware of COVID-19 or don't have to navigate it. Jesus and the disciples dealt with the storm while on the mission. But how we plan for and manage viral outbreaks is certainly something causing a range of responses and even conflict throughout our world. Wisdom is knowing what to do. As we go about the mission, how do we prepare for and deal with COVID-19 and any of its variants so they don't prevent us from doing our mission? Godly wisdom walks in faith. They're not separate. It doesn't walk in fear, and it's very important that we identify and eliminate fear when seeking wisdom. Otherwise, we'll likely replace wisdom with caution in order to mask fear. Now, caution is fine in the right place. But you know how sometimes we say, I'm just being cautious, I'm just being wise, and sometimes we're using it as an excuse for fear. It masks it. I'm actually afraid, so I'm going to be cautious. You can't mix in fear with wisdom. Wisdom wants to say, hang on, we can't do this from fear. This has to be in faith in God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So was it wise of Jesus to walk on water when the winds were crashing against the boat? Was it wise for Jesus to be asleep in the storm as the waves crashed over the boat, swamping the boat? Is Jesus wise? Wisdom doesn't avoid risk. It seeks to understand the risk and find God's way in it. It is well with my soul. And from that place, you know what? You'll be able to find wisdom. But if it's not well with your soul, and it's all turmoil in there, if it's fear or reaction, you're not going to be able to hear wisdom. It's well with my soul. Peace in here. I might just have a bit of a snooze in the storm, and then I'll wait on the Lord about what's next. Fear always tries to manipulate us. It always will try and catastrophize a situation. It will play in your imagination, getting you to contemplate all the bad things that could result before anything actually happens. Do you know that about fear? Fear is imagining what could happen. It hasn't happened. It plays in the realm of your imagination. Don't treat a situation like the worst case scenario if it's not the worst case scenario. Have a think about that. How often do we worry about things because we're worrying about the worst case scenario, but it's not the worst case scenario? It could become the worst case scenario, but actually it's not. Right now it's not. That's where we need to jump on that thing. For example, don't treat the cat like a wild tiger. They belong to the same feline species. They're very similar in many ways, but as much as there is a risk that the cat may scratch and hurt you, it is in no way similar in risk to the wild tiger. True? If the cat jumps on me and bites me, get off, cat. If the tiger jumps on me and bites me, quite different. Today, is your life facing a wild tiger, a cat, or a picture book about kittens? Oh. Now, if there's a report by zookeepers in Auckland that a number of wild tigers will be travelling down to Christchurch sometime after the 15th December, what's your response today? The report could definitely stir up fear. But what will wisdom do? Will it treat the report like tigers are in your backyard right now, holding your name card? Nigel, come out and play. I suggest that you'd start with questions about the report. When will the tigers arrive? Will they arrive on December 16th? Or January 16th? Or February 16th? When? Timing makes a difference, doesn't it? Will these be caged tigers? Or will they be freely roaming about? Is that an important question? Now, if you've already said, tigers coming, I'm gone, you've left Christchurch. Oh, hang on, they're coming in cages. Oh, right. Okay, I'll come home. Do they have functioning claws and teeth? That's even a good question. Now, if they don't have those things, I might go have a look at the tigers. I might even pet the tigers. Oh, unless they tell me don't do that because 250 kilograms, they'll jump on you and crush you. Oh, okay. Handy knowledge. Wisdom gathers knowledge, it seeks understanding. A report of wild tigers being transported to Christchurch means little unless you ask the right questions and get the right information. With knowledge and understanding, wisdom will seek God to find his way of dealing with the various risks because it now understands what they are. And when it comes to disease and sickness, part of God's provision is the special medicinal properties he's put in plants, in bacteria, in the environment, and certain types of people that God's created who love studying biology and chemistry and physics and genetics and DNA, all the things which I didn't love studying. It is not my area. But I really appreciated that someone else studies this stuff and helps use what's around us to provide medicines and even vaccines that help me. God designed knowledge and understanding. He designed this beautiful creation, glorious in so many ways, that there's so many things hidden within it, treasures that can help. Wisdom seeks knowledge and understanding and looks for God's direction and what to do. Sometimes he will tell you to walk on the water. True? Sometimes he'll tell you to pour out the water. Sometimes he'll get you drinking the water, not necessarily in the boat, but maybe in a wilderness. Sometimes he'll get you to avoid the water. Pastor Jonah in Uganda, when I got there a few years back, warned me, don't drink any water, and if they're going to give you food in a plate, make sure it's been dried properly. In other words, be afraid of the water. Okay. You'd like to know that I didn't get sick eating and drinking over there. Often like Jesus and Moses, God has prepared people he sends to lead us through the water. Could be a scientist. Could be a DHB clinician. Might even be a politician. The COVID-19 virus has been viewed a variety of ways. Some people see it as a mean but domestic cat. It can hurt you, but not much. It's not life-threatening. Some see it as a large invasion of hungry, fierce tigers killing whole populations of people. We must hide until all possible tigers have been captured or killed. Some see it as an undetermined number of dangerous tigers that will eventually arrive in Christchurch, but we don't know where, when, or how many. Your response to the news of wild tigers coming to Christchurch will be based upon the information you currently have, or the assumptions you've currently made, and your previous perspective on tigers and risk. And that's where people have heard different information and have different perspectives of tigers and risk. For example, if you've heard there's only one tiger on the loose in Hornby and you live in Burwood, some may well lock themselves away for protection because they're afraid of wild tigers and have a very low threshold to risk. Some will get in their car and drive to Hornby to see if they can see the tiger. They feel quite confident in their car. Or maybe they have experience in trapping tigers and they want to go and help. Some will pack up the family and leave the city until the all clear is given that there is no more tigers in Christchurch. Maybe that family have had a family member killed by a tiger in the past. And although they think their risk in Burwood is low, the memory of the tragedy they've experienced is just too great. Some will think, that's ridiculous. I live and work in Burwood. I have great faith in the authorities to trap the animal. I don't have to worry, and I'm carrying on with life as normal. There may be people who think there's no such thing as tigers. It's a conspiracy to control the population and for a one-world government operating behind the scenes called Operation Tiggy. There'll be those who think this is not our fault. The authorities should deal with it themselves and stop putting it onto us civilians to have to hide or limit our activities. I'm taking a stand for our freedoms. I'm not giving up the life I rightfully should have. And there'll be those who think, oh good, I carry a gun anyway. If I see a tiger come my way, I can hide or I can shoot it. No worries. Bring it on. I'm ready. So if you've heard it's only one tiger and it's in Hornby, how you respond to that information will be very different to some other people because of your perspective on tigers and your perspective on risk. But if someone else heard information that actually there's over 100 tigers in Christchurch and the authorities haven't been able to pinpoint where they are, your response will likely be different to the person who heard there's only one tiger in Hornby that has no teeth. Information. What have you heard about COVID-19? Perspective. What is your tolerance for risk? How much of your perspective is affected by past events? You may have had some bad experiences in the past and you now have very low tolerance for risk. You may be more prone to treat a cat like it was a tiger. For some, it's possible our perspective is affected by other issues that are not related to viruses and vaccines, and we're at risk of maybe treating the tigers like they're kittens. But then there's another part of this puzzle around people's response to risk. It's responsibility. If there are wild tigers roaming the streets in Christchurch, you might be a fast runner and carry a gun, and be fully armoured. But how will you take care of those who have mobility issues and can't run away from tigers? What about your role? What if it happens that you are a hunter, or you work for the council in animal control, or you're a specialist tiger keeper at the zoo, or you're an army sniper? What are you supposed to be doing about the threat? Please don't leave our city because we need you. Responsibility makes a difference, doesn't it? Please pray for our frontline medical staff that will be managing and monitoring, looking after people in hospital and ICU in Christchurch, facing the tigers. Our city is facing the imminent arrival of COVID-19. Our individual and collective response to that is dependent upon information we've heard, perspective that we hold, and responsibility that we have. And this Thursday, I've arranged for 3 clinical leaders in our local pandemic response from our own district health board to come and help us understand COVID-19, the risks, the realities, the teeth of the tigers, and also answer our questions about vaccines and the virus transmission. So is COVID-19 a tiger or a kitten? Are vaccines tigers or zookeepers? What's your perspective? Some people are afraid of unvaccinated people as if they're infected people. Some people are afraid of vaccines as if they're the sickness and not the medicine. Wisdom seeks knowledge and understanding and listens for God's direction and provision. If you've heard that COVID is coming to town and it makes people sick and dead, remember to ask questions before jumping to worst case scenarios. That's why we're having a Q&A on Thursday, so we can ask those questions, so we can assess the risks, so we can understand what's expected to be arriving in Christchurch. I encourage you to make the most of that opportunity, because sometimes it's not information, sometimes it's presumption. Sometimes we've filled in gaps and not realised it. Let's ask some questions this Thursday. There are winds, there are storms, and there is a way through together, which brings me to the third and final part of this message, which is a word God gave me this week for you, Legacy Community Church. A single word. Prejudice. Gordon Allport defined prejudice as a feeling favourable or unfavourable toward a person or thing prior to or not based on actual experience. So prejudice, pre is the preposition, meaning previous to or before, judgment. So typically, prejudice is an unfavourable view of someone before a fair process of judgment has been made. It's my contempt or mistreat of someone because I've prejudged them without first having all the facts. As the traffic light system kicks in and COVID comes to town, some people will get rejected from venues, work, homes and social gatherings. Some people will get sick. Our reactivity, our sensitivity, our response to risk and our varied experiences will bring up our underlying prejudices within us, if they're there. And God is watching us, church. He is very attentive to what's in our heart, not so much what's in our opinions. I love something that, I don't know if it was a songwriter or just a quote that came back in the 90s. It said, God will offend your mind to reveal your heart. Offend your thinking to reveal what's in the heart. What's going to come out of our heart in the weeks and months ahead. The way we love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength is seen in the way we love one another. That's why Jesus didn't say there's one important commandment. He says the two most important. Love God and love your neighbour. They go together. From the message today, hopefully you got to think a bit more about how people arrive at different positions on vaccination, COVID transmission, risks and freedoms. You hear people say of those not yet vaccinated that they are anti-vax, when most of the unvaccinated I talk to aren't. Now, how many people here have taken the flu vaccine this year? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. I reckon that might be about 15% taken the flu vaccine. Therefore, the rest of you are all anti-vaxxers, obviously. True? Obviously ignorant of the science, you're totally selfish, risking transmitting influenza to those who haven't taken this year's flu vaccine. Around 500 people a year die of the flu. And you didn't take a flu vaccine. Anti-vax. Or have I prejudged you maybe without knowing what you really think about the flu, the vaccine, vaccines in general? In fact, since this has kicked off, I've been thinking, I actually don't really know anything about the flu vaccine. I'm going to ask these guys on Thursday night. So, well, I don't know about it. Should I be taking it? I've never even thought about it. You may well hear some unvaccinated person say they're vaccinated. All these people who've just given into the government, gotten the jab, are gullible and lazy. They haven't taken time to listen to other experts with different views. They just accepted everything the Prime Minister and the biased media has fed them. Fair enough? But I know there's many people who haven't actually been that keen on either the government or getting jabbed, but upon careful reflection and investigation, have chosen to get vaccinated for vulnerable people in their family because they've seen the information that shows that the vaccinated are less likely to become infected and less likely to transmit infection. So they're trying to protect someone who can't run from the tiger. I'm glad I didn't prejudge them. You'll likely hear people condemn the unvaccinated that they don't care about others or that they've chosen to give up a job or career they love and that they are putting others at risk. But I think a lot of people who hold such views haven't actually spent much time with the unvaccinated, asking them why they're not vaccinated, listening to their stories, understanding their heart. Most unvaccinated people I've talked to are deeply concerned and have done a lot of reading, desperately wanting to keep their jobs, and have received information that the vaccine might be unsafe for them. And based on that information, have made a decision. I talked to an unvaccinated person this week who is losing a career he loves because he isn't yet vaccinated. I guess it's his own fault. That's the consequences if you're going to be selfish, maybe. He recently had a heart event, physical, and had to have an ambulance taken to hospital. His family has a history of heart disease. He therefore researched the Pfizer vaccine and was concerned that it may be a high-risk vaccine for his heart condition. I don't know what information he's read, and I'm no expert. He really wants one of the other vaccines that he's looked into, but unfortunately the government won't bring it in. Now, is he selfish for not taking the Pfizer vaccine like 90% of the population is? Or would I be selfish in thinking he's not thinking enough about me and the risk that might cause to me? He doesn't want to pass on the virus to anybody. He's prepared to keep himself very separate. But the reality is he doesn't have the virus. He's not infectious. His exclusion from society will make him a low risk to the population because he likely won't be able to get a job because he's unvaccinated. He probably won't be able to afford Christchurch rent rates and is thinking about leaving town. Now, if he was in America, well, they've got a number of vaccines there, and one of them is the ones he's researched, and he'd be able to get it, and that's what he's asked the government for. But he's not in America, so he can't get it. If he was, he'd be vaccinated. Wouldn't be called anti-vax. He'd be accepted and he'd be free. See, prejudice is when I lump people together with a broad brushstroke of perspective, or when I have a pre-existing view of someone without actually getting to know their story, or when I think my view is so right, the other person must be wrong. So I don't ever get around to listening to them because they're already wrong. Prejudice is an infection of the soul that causes sickness and death to kingdom community. What's our mission? To be community, worshipping disciples. Prejudice is an infection that will make relationships sick. It will kill relationships. And God wants it out of His church. Over the coming weeks and months, I want to encourage you to take time to get to know the stories of those who have a different view of the Tigers than you. Listen to them. Pray for them. Love them as you love yourself. If there's prejudice in your heart, repent. Jesus warns us not to judge one another, and the standard that you use to judge others, he will use to judge you. How do you want to be judged by the King? He'll use your standard. Love one another as you love yourself. For the one who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has seen. The reality is we're still talking about the message of worship. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. You can't love God if you won't love your brother. If we can get this right inside the church, we can take it out into the community. Our nation needs wise, faith-filled, merciful missionaries taking good news to a weary nation. I think the winds are going to increase over these months ahead. The good news is New Zealand's got you. With love, with grace, with wisdom, with faith, with mercy, with a listening ear, with an open hand, with a caring heart. Christchurch has got you. When tigers come to town, it's going to be okay because you're here. Am I right? Whatever happens in the weeks and months ahead, keep reminding yourself, faith, not fear. Mission, not distraction. Wisdom, not ignorance. Love, not prejudice.